At our family Thanksgiving dinner, my mom pointed to the porch and commanded, "Your seat's out there." My sister laughed. "Even our puppy made the table before you." I surveyed the room and found every plate had a name. Everyone was jubilant, except me. So I picked up my gift from under the tree, turned to her, and proclaimed, "Make sure you read what's under your plate." I walked out without looking back and heard yelling before I even reached the exit gate. I, 32M, stood in the doorway of my childhood home, holding a bottle of wine and a carefully wrapped gift, watching my family gather around the Thanksgiving table. The smell of roasted turkey and stuffing filled the air, but something felt off the moment I stepped inside. Mom barely glanced at me before pointing toward the back porch through the kitchen window, her expression cold and dismissive. She told me my seat was out there. I stared at her, not quite processing what she'd said. My younger sister, standing near the dining table with a glass of champagne, burst into laughter. She said even their new puppy had earned a spot at the table before me. The words hit like a slap, but I kept my face neutral. I'd learned over the years not to give them the satisfaction of seeing me hurt. I walked slowly into the dining room, scanning the table. Every single plate had a name card sitting precisely in its place. Dad at the head, Mom to his right, my sister and her husband across from each other, even my aunt and uncle who I barely saw anymore. And yes, there was a small cushion chair with a bowl on the floor labeled Max for their golden retriever puppy. But no place for me. Everyone was chatting, laughing, pouring drinks, completely unbothered by my presence or absence. They'd planned this. This wasn't some oversight or last-minute seating issue. They had deliberately excluded me from my own family's Thanksgiving dinner. I asked Mom why there wasn't a seat for me, keeping my voice level. She didn't even look up from adjusting the centerpiece. She said I knew exactly why, and if I wanted to make a scene, I could do it outside. My sister chimed in again, saying I should be grateful they even let me in the house after everything. After everything. That phrase had been following me for 3 years now, ever since I'd refused to invest in Dad's business venture. He'd wanted me to put in $50,000, money I'd saved working 70-hour weeks as an architect. I'd reviewed his business plan, consulted with financial advisors, and determined it was too risky. I'd offered to loan him $10,000 instead, with a clear repayment plan. He'd called me selfish, said I didn't care about family. Mom had backed him completely, saying a real son would support his father's dreams without question. My sister, who'd contributed nothing but had enthusiastically supported the idea, became the golden child overnight. The business failed within 8 months, exactly as the projections suggested it would. But somehow, in their minds, this became my fault. If I'd just invested, Dad would have had enough capital to make it work. If I'd just believed in him, things would have been different. The mental gymnastics were impressive. Since then, I'd been systematically cut out. Birthday gatherings happened without me knowing. Christmas celebrations were scheduled, and then I'd hear about them through social media posts. Phone calls went unreturned. Text messages were left on read. But they'd always stopped short of complete exclusion, always leaving just enough connection that I'd think maybe, possibly, things might improve. Until tonight. I looked at that table, at those carefully arranged name cards, at my family laughing and celebrating without me, and something inside me shifted. I'd brought a gift, like I did every year. I'd shown up with hope, like an idiot, thinking maybe this time would be different. But I was done hoping. I walked over to the Christmas tree in the corner of the living room, where a few early presents were already arranged. Mine was there, wrapped in silver paper with a red bow. I'd spent weeks on what was inside. Not the gift itself, but what came with it. I picked it up and turned to Mom. I told her to make sure she read what was under her plate before she ate. She looked at me confused, asking what I was talking about. I said she'd figure it out, and I wished them all a wonderful Thanksgiving. My sister asked where I was going, her tone mocking. I told her I was going somewhere I was actually wanted. Dad finally looked up from his phone, telling me not to be dramatic. I said I wasn't being dramatic. I was being clear, and they'd understand soon enough. I walked toward the front door, and that's when I heard Mom gasp. She'd lifted her plate. Underneath was an envelope I'd placed there earlier when I'd arrived, during the few minutes I'd been alone while they were all in the kitchen. I'd moved quickly, knowing exactly where Mom sat, slipping it under her plate while my heart pounded. Inside that envelope was a letter. Not a long, emotional plea for understanding. Not an angry rant about their treatment of me. Just facts, laid out cleanly and precisely, the way I'd learned to present information in my profession. I'd written that this would be the last time they'd see or hear from me. I was removing myself from their lives completely, effective immediately. I'd listed every family event I'd been excluded from over the past 3 years, with dates. Every phone call ignored. Every text left unanswered. Every cruel comment disguised as a joke. But the real weight of the letter came in the second page. I'd detailed my financial situation because they'd spent 3 years calling me selfish for not investing in Dad's business. I'd explained that the $50,000 they'd demanded represented my entire emergency fund plus part of my retirement savings. I'd included copies of the business analysis I'd had done, showing the venture had a 78% projected failure rate. Then I'd listed everything I'd actually done for them financially that they'd conveniently forgotten. The $5,000 I'd loaned Dad for years ago for his truck, never repaid. The $3,000 I'd given Mom for her medical bills. The countless dinners, gifts, and expenses I'd covered over the years. Total, over $15,000, none of which I'd ever asked to be repaid. I'd attached bank statements and canceled checks as proof. The final paragraph was the simplest. I wrote that I'd spent years trying to earn back a place in a family that had already decided I didn't deserve one. I was done trying. They could keep their conditional love and their scapegoating. I was choosing my peace over their dysfunction. And I'd added one more thing, taped to the bottom of the page. A check for $10,000 made out to Dad, with final payment for family obligations in the memo line. I wrote that this settled anything they thought I owed them, real or imagined. After this, we were even, and we were done. The yelling started before I'd even reached the front gate. I heard Mom shrieking my name, demanding I come back inside. Dad's voice boomed, telling me I was being ridiculous. My sister was saying something I couldn't quite make out, but her tone was panicked. I kept walking. My car was parked at the curb. I got in, started the engine, and pulled away slowly, watching the house in my rearview mirror. The front door flew open and Mom ran out onto the porch, still holding the letter, waving it in the air. Dad appeared behind her, his face red even from this distance. I didn't stop. I drove to my apartment across town, the place I'd bought 2 years ago after getting a promotion. They'd never visited, never asked to see it, never acknowledged that I'd achieved something I was proud of. My phone started ringing before I'd even made it home. Mom, Dad, my sister, over and over. I let it ring. When I walked into my apartment, I saw I had 47 missed calls and dozens of text messages. I didn't read them. Instead, I blocked all 3 numbers, along with my aunt and uncle who'd sat at that table, and said nothing while I was banished to the porch. I ordered Chinese food, poured myself a bourbon, and sat on my couch in the silence of my own space. It felt lighter somehow, despite everything. Or maybe because of everything. Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since Thanksgiving. I need to write this down because the aftermath has been more intense than I expected, and documenting it helps me process. The night of Thanksgiving, after I blocked their numbers, they apparently tried everything to reach me. My coworker told me my sister showed up at our office the Monday after, demanding to speak with me. Security turned her away when I told them in advance I wasn't accepting visitors from family members. She'd apparently caused enough of a scene that I had to have a brief conversation with HR, explaining it was a personal family matter and assuring them it wouldn't affect my work. My phone stayed blissfully quiet with those numbers blocked, but they found other ways. My aunt called from a number I didn't recognize, getting through my defenses. She launched into a speech about family forgiveness and how Mom was devastated. I asked her where this concern for family had been when I was being exiled to the porch while everyone laughed. She stammered something about not wanting to get involved. I told her that choosing not to get involved was itself a choice, and she'd made it clear whose side she was on. I hung up and blocked that number too. Dad sent an email to my work account, which I reported to IT as personal harassment. The email was deleted before I could read more than the first line, which was something about me being ungrateful. IT informed him that further emails to my work address would result in formal complaints. The gift I'd left under the tree, the one I'd told Mom to read what was under her plate, had been a photo album. I'd spent months putting it together, thinking foolishly that maybe showing them memories of better times would crack through their resentment. Pictures of family vacations, holidays when we'd actually been happy, moments when they'd been proud of me. Each photo had a caption with the date and a brief memory. The final page had a single sentence. "This is what I'll remember instead of the last 3 years." According to a message my sister managed to send through a mutual friend, Mom had broken down crying when she'd finally opened it after reading the letter. The friend said my sister wanted me to know that Mom realized she'd made a mistake and wanted to talk. I told the friend I appreciated them passing along the message, but my decision stood. If Mom realized she'd made a mistake, she'd had 3 years to reach that realization before humiliating me at Thanksgiving. The tears now were about consequences, not genuine remorse. My sister apparently told people I'd stolen money from Dad by giving him that $10,000 check, claiming I was trying to buy my way out of family obligations. The irony of her calling it theft when I was literally giving them money was apparently lost on her. Several family friends reached out, confused about what had actually happened. I sent them each a brief, factual summary and copies of the letter I'd left. Most responded with some version of understanding, though a few took my family's side, saying I should be the bigger person. I'd spent 3 years being the bigger person. I was done. What surprised me most was the sense of relief. I'd expected to feel guilty, to second-guess my decision, to wonder if I'd overreacted. Instead, I felt free. The constant low-level anxiety about when the next insult would come, the next exclusion, the next demand, had evaporated. I wasn't walking on eggshells anymore. I'd started therapy 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. Actually, knowing the holidays would be difficult. My therapist had helped me understand that I'd been stuck in a cycle of seeking approval from people who decided years ago I'd never earn it. The Porch incident had just been the most visually obvious example of what had been happening emotionally for years. She'd asked me what I thought would happen if I stopped trying. I'd said I thought they'd either realize what they'd lost or prove they didn't care. Either way, I'd have my answer. Now I had it. Update 2. Christmas came and went. I spent it with friends who'd become my chosen family over the years. We did a potluck dinner, exchanged modest gifts, and watched terrible holiday movies while drinking spiked hot chocolate. It was the best Christmas I'd had in years, possibly ever. No tension, no passive-aggressive comments, no feeling like I had to earn my place at the table. My phone, with those numbers still blocked, apparently continued to receive attempts at contact that I never saw. My cell carrier's spam filter caught and deleted them automatically. I'd set up the blocks to route everything to a folder I never checked, digital messages disappearing into a void. But 3 days after Christmas, something happened that I hadn't anticipated. My younger cousin, Emma, showed up at my apartment. She was 19, home from college for winter break. We'd been close when she was younger, before the family rift had widened. She'd texted ahead, asking if she could visit, and I'd agreed, curious about what she wanted. She sat on my couch, nervous, holding a cup of coffee I'd made her. She told me everything that had happened after I'd left Thanksgiving, details I hadn't known. After I'd driven away, Mom had read the letter out loud to everyone at the table. Emma said the room had gone completely silent. Dad had tried to defend their treatment of me, saying I'd brought it on myself by refusing to support the family business. But my aunt had quietly pointed out that I'd been right about the business failing, and they'd never acknowledged that. The argument had escalated. My sister had defended Mom and Dad, but her husband had apparently stayed quiet. Emma said she'd caught him looking uncomfortable, like he was starting to see the situation differently. The Thanksgiving dinner had essentially ended with everyone leaving early, the food barely touched. But what Emma really wanted to tell me was about Christmas Eve. My parents had hosted their usual party, but the atmosphere had been strained. Several relatives had asked where I was. Mom had given some vague explanation about me being busy. Emma said she'd spoken up and told everyone the truth, reading key parts of my letter from her phone where she'd taken photos of it. The reaction had been mixed but telling. Some relatives had been shocked, claiming they'd had no idea things were that bad. Others had admitted they'd noticed the treatment but hadn't wanted to get involved. A few had actually gotten angry at my parents, particularly some of Dad's siblings who'd apparently never agreed with how he'd handled the business situation. Emma told me her own parents were now refusing to attend family events until mine issued a genuine apology to me. 2 other families had apparently done the same. The unified front my parents had counted on was cracking. She said Mom had pulled her aside and asked her to convince me to come to a family meeting in January to talk things through. Emma had refused, telling Mom that I didn't owe them another chance to hurt me. She'd then driven to my apartment to tell me she supported my decision and to let me know that not everyone in the family agreed with how I'd been treated. I thanked her. I told her it meant more than she knew to hear that someone had actually spoken up. She asked if I'd ever consider reconciliation if they really apologized. I said I honestly didn't know, but I knew I wasn't ready to find out. The wounds were too fresh, and I didn't trust that any apology would be genuine rather than motivated by the social fallout they were experiencing. Emma hugged me before she left and told me she'd keep me updated if anything significant happened, but only if I wanted to know. I told her I'd appreciate that, and that she was welcome to visit any time. After she left, I sat with what she'd told me. Part of me felt vindicated, hearing that others were finally seeing the situation clearly. But a larger part of me felt sad. Sad that it had taken such a dramatic break for anyone to question what had been happening. Sad that my family had valued their grudge more than their relationship with me. But I didn't regret walking out that Thanksgiving. I'd spent years dimming my own light, trying to make them comfortable. I'd apologized for things I hadn't done wrong. I'd accepted crumbs of affection and convinced myself they were enough. They weren't enough. I deserved better. And finally, I was choosing better. My life didn't have a gaping hole where my family used to be. Instead, it had space. Space for people who actually valued me. Space for peace. Space for growth. I'd started taking weekend photography classes, something I'd always wanted to do, but never had time for because I'd been so focused on trying to fix things with my family. I was building a life I didn't need to escape from. And that was worth more than a seat at a table where I was never truly wanted. If you like this story, please like this video and subscribe us for more such real-life-based stories. Thanks in advance.